The rain that evening was not the kind that cleanses the city, but the kind that settles into the bones. A cold, persistent drizzle that made the pavement shine like dark oil under the streetlights of Chicago. I remember standing outside the brass doors of the Sterling room, checking my reflection in the glass, smoothing down the hem of a blouse I had ironed 3 times to ensure it looked crisp enough for a place where the napkins cost more than my hourly rate. I was 37 years old, and I had reached that specific age where hope feels less like a buoyant emotion and more like a calculated risk. Something you weigh against the stability of your savings account and the quiet erosion of your independence. My friend Sarah had set this up, a blind date with a man named James, a colleague of her husband's who she claimed was kind, stable, and looking for something serious. I had agreed mostly because I was tired of the silence in my apartment, tired of the way the walls seemed to close in when I came home from another day of freelance editing work that paid just enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to stop worrying about the future. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of wet concrete and exhaust, and pushed open the door. The interior of the Sterling room was a study in muted wealth, all dark wood, low lighting, and the soft clinking of crystal against silver. I was shown to a table in the back, a secluded booth that offered privacy, which I appreciated because I felt immediately out of place. My shoes were sensible, my bag was worn at the corners, and I knew that everyone else in that room was wearing armor made of designer labels and confidence I did not possess. I sat down and ordered a sparkling water, telling myself I would wait 10 minutes for James, and if he didn't show, I would leave with my dignity intact. That was the plan. But then he sat down. He didn't ask if I was the one waiting for James. He simply slid into the booth opposite me, placing a leather portfolio on the table with a quiet thud. He was older than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with hair that was streaked with gray at the temples and eyes that held a weary intelligence. He didn't smile immediately. He looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that felt less like an assessment of my appearance and more like an attempt to read the text of my mood. I assumed he was James. He assumed I was the person he was waiting for. It wasn't until the waiter came to take our orders that the first thread of the misunderstanding began to unravel, though neither of us pulled it yet. He ordered a scotch, neat, and I watched his hands. They were steady, manicured, but there was a tension in his wrists that suggested he was carrying a heavy load. I ordered the cheapest item on the menu, a soup, and I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as I said it, knowing the waiter noted the disparity. When the waiter left, the man across from me spoke. His voice was low, calibrated, the kind of voice that commands a boardroom without needing to raise its volume. He asked me how my day had been, and I gave him the standard answer, the one we all give when we don't want to burden a stranger with the truth of our exhaustion. I told him it was fine. He nodded, as if he knew I was lying, but he didn't press. Instead, he talked about the rain, about the traffic on Lake Shore Drive, about the way the city changes when the weather turns. It was safe ground. We danced around the small talk for 20 minutes, and in that space, I found myself relaxing. He was polite, attentive, and he didn't try to impress me with stories of his accomplishments. In fact, he seemed almost reluctant to talk about himself at all. It was when the food arrived that the mistake surfaced. The waiter brought his steak, expensive and rare, and my soup. The waiter also addressed him as Mr. Thorne. I froze, the spoon hovering halfway to my mouth. Thorne, I knew that name. Julian Thorne was a developer, a billionaire who owned half the skyline I looked at from my bus window every morning. He was not James, the colleague of Sarah's husband. He was not the stable, middle-class man I had been promised. I was sitting across from a man whose net worth could buy my building, and I was wearing a blouse I had bought on clearance. I put the spoon down. I looked at him, and I saw the realization dawn in his eyes at the same moment. He knew I wasn't the person he was supposed to meet. He was waiting for a business associate, likely another man named James, or perhaps he had simply taken the table reserved for someone else due to a hostess error. The silence that stretched between us was heavy, filled with the sudden awareness of the chasm between our worlds. I expected him to be annoyed. I expected him to call the manager, to have me removed, to treat me like an intruder in his sanctuary. Instead, he took a sip of his scotch, set the glass down, and said, "Well, since we are both here and the rain is still falling, perhaps we could finish the conversation." That was the hook, the moment that caught me. Not because he was wealthy, but because he chose courtesy over protocol. I should have left. Logic dictated that I stand up, apologize for the confusion, and walk out into the rain to catch the bus home. But I was tired, and the booth was warm, and there was a curiosity in me that outweighed my caution. I stayed. We talked for another hour. We did not talk about money. We did not talk about his company or my freelance struggles. We talked about books, about the way Chicago changes in the winter, about the difficulty of finding honesty in a world that rewards performance. I found myself speaking more openly than I had in years. I told him about my love for editing, about the satisfaction of fixing a broken sentence, about the way words could be rearranged to change the meaning of a life. He listened. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look around the room to see who else was watching. He looked at me. When we finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped. He walked me to the door, and he didn't offer to call me a car. He didn't offer to pay for my soup, which I had insisted on paying for myself with a credit card that I knew was nearing its limit. He respected my boundary. He simply said, "I hope you get home safely, Cadence." He knew my name. I hadn't told him. I realized later Sarah must have put my name on the reservation when she booked it, and the hostess had merged the tables. I went home that night and lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, analyzing the interaction with the precision of a surgeon. I told myself it was an anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of my life that would not repeat. Men like Julian Thorne did not date women like me. We existed in different ecosystems, governed by different laws of physics. But the next day, my phone buzzed. A text message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. It said, "I enjoyed the conversation." The syntax was formal, precise. I didn't reply, I deleted the thread. I told myself I was protecting myself from disappointment. I had been hurt before, not by violence, but by the slow erosion of trust, by promises that sounded good but evaporated under pressure. I was 37, and I had learned that clarity was more valuable than charm. If he wanted to find me, he knew where I worked. If he wanted to pursue this, he would have to be deliberate. I went back to my work. I edited a manuscript about a woman who loses everything and finds herself in the ruins. I highlighted the sentences that rang true and cut the ones that felt like melodrama. I wanted my life to be like the good editing, stripped of the unnecessary, leaving only what was essential. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from him. I told myself I was relieved. But then, on Thursday, an envelope arrived at my office. It was thick, cream-colored stock, no return address. Inside was a book. It was a first edition of a novel I had mentioned in passing at the restaurant, an obscure title I loved but could never afford. There was no note, just the book. It was a gesture that felt intimate and intrusive all at once. He had listened. He had remembered. But he had also bypassed my defenses. I sat at my desk, holding the book, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was a test. I knew that. He was seeing if I would accept the gift, if I would be swayed by the value of the object rather than the intent behind it. I took the book home. I put it on my shelf. I did not text him. I waited. I wanted to see if he would follow up, if he would demand acknowledgement. He didn't. A week later, another text. "There is a lecture at the library on Saturday about urban planning. I thought you might find it interesting." I looked up the lecture. It was free, open to the public. He wasn't buying my time, he was inviting me to share an experience. That was the difference. He was offering access, not charity. I replied for the first time, "I will be there." The library was cold, the air smelling of old paper and dust. He was waiting in the back, wearing a coat that was expensive but understated. We sat through the lecture without speaking. Afterwards, we walked along the lakefront. The wind was biting, but we walked anyway. He told me why he was there. He said he was tired of people who wanted something from him. He said he was tired of the performance of wealth. He said he wanted to meet someone who looked at him and saw a man, not a wallet. I listened, and I believed him, but I also kept my guard up. Belief is a dangerous thing when you have nothing to lose. I told him about my life carefully. I told him I was freelance, that I lived alone, that I valued my independence above all else. I didn't tell him about the debt. I didn't tell him about the letter from the landlord that was sitting on my kitchen counter, the one that mentioned eviction if the arrears weren't cleared by the end of the month. I kept that in the dark. I wanted him to like me for my mind, not pity me for my circumstances. But I also knew that if this went anywhere, the truth would have to come out. Secrets are like debt, they accumulate interest until they become unpayable. We started seeing each other regularly. It was a slow dance. He would suggest places, always public, always accessible. He never insisted on paying, though he often found ways to ensure I didn't have to, like buying tickets in advance or choosing venues where the cost was included. I noticed things about him. I noticed that he was lonely. Not the lonely of being alone, but the lonely of being surrounded by people who need you for what you can give them. I noticed that he was intelligent, but that his intelligence was often used as a shield. He analyzed everything, just like I did. We were two people who had built fortresses around our hearts, peeking over the walls to see if the other was safe. The intimacy grew in the spaces between words. It was in the way he held the door, not to show off, but to make sure I didn't have to struggle with the weight. It was in the way he listened when I talked about my work, asking questions that showed he understood the nuance of what I was doing. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope, but with hope came fear. The fear that this was too good to be true. The fear that I was the anomaly, the mistake, and that eventually the reality of our situations would collide. The collision happened sooner than I expected. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a shouting match in the rain. It was a document. I was at his apartment one evening, a penthouse that overlooked the city. I had gone there to work on a manuscript while he took a call in the other room. I needed quiet, and his study was the quietest place I knew. I was looking for a pen, opening a drawer in his desk when I saw it. A file folder labeled with my name. Cadence. Inside were papers, bank statements, not mine, his, but there were notes. Notes about my financial situation. How did he know? I felt the blood drain from my face. I picked up the papers. There was a report from a private investigator. It detailed my debt, my landlord issues, my credit score. It was all there, laid out in cold, black ink. I felt violated. I felt small. All this time, I thought he was getting to know me, but he had been investigating me. The trust I had begun to build shattered in an instant. I put the papers back. I closed the drawer. I waited for him to come out of the other room. When he did, he saw my face. He knew I knew. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't try to lie. He just stood there looking tired. I asked him why. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I thought I would be screaming, but I was too hurt for noise. He said he wanted to help. He said he knew about the eviction notice. He said he wanted to pay it off before I even had to ask. He said he didn't want me to worry. I told him that by knowing without me telling him, he had taken away my choice. I told him that privacy was the only thing I had that was truly mine. He argued that love meant sharing burdens. I argued that trust meant waiting to be invited in. We stood there in the quiet of the penthouse, the city lights blinking below us like distant stars, and I realized that this was the test. Not the money, not the debt, but the communication. Could we navigate this without destroying each other? I told him I needed to leave. I told him I needed time to think. He didn't stop me. He didn't try to convince me to stay. He just nodded and he said, "I will wait." That night, I went home to my small apartment, the one that might not be mine for much longer, and I sat on the floor. I cried. Not because I was poor, but because I felt misunderstood. I had chosen clarity over anger in the past, but this felt like a betrayal of the process. He had skipped the step where I told him. He had decided for me. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I avoided his calls. I focused on my work, trying to find a solution to my financial problem on my own. I reached out to clients, I asked for advances, I sold things I didn't need. I was trying to prove that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need his money, that I didn't need his rescue. But the math didn't work. The numbers were stubborn. I was short. I was going to lose the apartment. And the irony was not lost on me. The man who could solve it with a signature was the one I was pushing away because I wanted to solve it myself. I realized then that my pride was becoming a prison. I was so afraid of being seen as a project, a charity case, that I was willing to lose my home to prove a point. I sat at my kitchen table, the eviction notice in front of me, and I thought about Julian. I thought about the way he had looked at me in the restaurant. I thought about the book. I thought about the library. I thought about the fact that he had admitted to the investigation. He hadn't hidden it. When I found the file, he didn't lie. That was something. In a world of deception, honesty about the deception was a rare commodity. I decided to call him. I needed to see him. I needed to have the conversation that we had skipped. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. Not his penthouse, not my apartment. A place where the coffee was average and the noise level was high enough that we couldn't be overheard, but low enough that we could hear each other. I told him what I felt. I told him that knowing he knew felt like being naked in a room full of people. I told him that I wanted to be the one to share my struggles, not have them uncovered like evidence in a trial. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just listened. When I was done, he spoke. He said he understood. He said he came from a world where problems were solved before they were spoken, where efficiency was valued over process. He said he thought he was protecting me, but he realized he was controlling me. He said he was sorry. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a simple admission of fault. And in that admission, I felt the tension in my chest begin to loosen. He handed me an envelope. I opened it. It wasn't money. It was a contract, a lease, for a different apartment, one that was in my name. He wasn't paying my debt. He was offering a fresh start, but only if I signed it. Only if I chose it. He said he had found a place that was affordable, in a building his company managed, but the lease would be standard. I would pay rent. I would be responsible. He was removing the barrier of my current debt by offering a way out that didn't involve charity but opportunity. I looked at the lease. I looked at him. I saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He was risking rejection. He was putting the power back in my hands. This was the truth I had been seeking. Not the truth about his money, but the truth about his intent. He didn't want to own me. He wanted to partner with me. He wanted to build something where we were equals, even if the starting lines were different. I signed the lease. Not because I needed the money, but because I trusted the man who offered it. We sat there for a long time drinking coffee that had gone cold. We talked about the future. We talked about how we would handle money. We talked about transparency. We agreed that no more secrets. No more investigations. If there was a problem, we would speak it before we solved it. It was a simple agreement, but it felt like a vow. I realized then that love was not about finding someone who completes you, but finding someone who respects your autonomy enough to let you complete yourself. He was not my savior. He was my witness. The move was quick. I packed my boxes, I left the old apartment, and I walked into the new one with the key in my hand. It was smaller than his penthouse, but it was mine. He helped me carry the boxes, not because he had staff to do it, but because he wanted to feel the weight of my life in his hands. We ordered pizza on the floor of the empty living room. We laughed. It was the first time we had laughed in weeks. The laughter felt like healing. It washed away the tension of the investigation, the fear of the eviction, the shame of the debt. We were just two people, sitting on a hardwood floor, eating pizza, planning where the sofa would go. I looked at him and I saw the man from the restaurant, the one who stayed when he could have left, the one who listened. The wealth was there, yes. It was in the clothes he wore, in the car he drove, in the building we were in. But it was secondary. It was background noise. The signal was the trust. The signal was the fact that he had stepped back when I asked him to and stepped forward when I invited him. Weeks turned into months. The relationship deepened. We navigated the complexities of our different worlds with care. I met his colleagues, and I held my own. I didn't try to pretend I was one of them, and they respected me for it. He met my friends, and he didn't try to impress them with his status. He just listened to their stories about their kids and their jobs. We found a rhythm. I continued to work. I continued to edit. I didn't quit my job because he made enough for both of us. I worked because it gave me purpose. He supported that. He understood that my work was part of who I was, not just a way to pay bills. There were moments of friction, of course. There were times when his schedule pulled him away, times when my insecurity flared up when I saw the headlines about his business deals. But we had the framework now. We had the agreement. When something bothered me, I said it. When something bothered him, he said it. We didn't let the resentment sit. We didn't let the misunderstanding grow roots. One evening, almost a year after the wrong date, we went back to the Sterling Room. It was raining again. The city was washed in that same dark oil sheen. We sat at the same table. The booth was still there. The waiter was different, but the memory of that night was vivid. We ordered the same things, the scotch and the soup. We clinked glasses. He looked at me, and his eyes were softer than they had been that first night. The weariness was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment. He told me that he had been waiting for someone that night, a business partner who never showed up. He said he was ready to leave when I sat down. He said he stayed because he saw something in my face. He said I looked like someone who was fighting a battle he couldn't see. I told him I was. I told him I was fighting to stay afloat. He said he was glad he stayed. I said I was glad I made a mistake. We talked about the file again. We talked about the breach of trust. He apologized again. I accepted it again. It was important to acknowledge the scar, to remind ourselves that we had healed over it. I thought about the women who would hear this story. I thought about the women who are told that they need to be saved, that they need to find a man to fix their lives. I wanted them to know that it wasn't about being saved. It was about being seen. It was about finding someone who sees your struggle and doesn't try to erase it, but offers you a hand while you climb out of it yourself. I was not a poor lady who fell for a billionaire. I was a woman who found a partner who respected her enough to let her be poor until she was ready to be something else. The money didn't change me. The trust did. The money was just a circumstance. The trust was the choice. And that choice was made every day. It was made when he asked instead of assumed. It was made when I spoke instead of hid. It was made in the small moments, the coffee shops, the empty apartments, the rainy nights. There is a misconception that wealth buys happiness. I have seen enough of it now to know that wealth buys comfort, it buys security, it buys options. But it does not buy peace. Peace has to be built. It has to be negotiated. It has to be earned through the hard work of communication. Julian and I built that peace. We built it on the foundation of that wrong date. If I had met James, the colleague of Sarah's husband, I might be happy. I might be safe. But I would not be here. I would not be sitting in this booth, looking at a man who knows my debt and loves me anyway. I would not be knowing that I am loved for my mind, for my resilience, for my ability to stand on my own 2 feet even when the ground is shaking. The waiter brought the check. Julian reached for it, then stopped. He looked at me. I smiled. I reached for my wallet. We split the bill. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. It was a symbol of the balance we had found. We walked out into the rain. He opened his umbrella, and we walked under it together, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's bodies against the cold wind. We didn't rush to the car. We walked. We talked about where we would go for dinner next week. We talked about a vacation we might take, not to a private island, but to a city where we could get lost in a crowd. We talked about the future, and for the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. I often think about that moment in the study when I found the file. It was the darkest moment of the relationship. It was the moment I almost walked away. But I didn't. I chose clarity. I chose to have the hard conversation. I chose to believe that he was capable of change, and he chose to believe that I was capable of forgiveness. That is the resolution. Not the wedding, not the house, not the bank account. The resolution is the knowledge that when things go wrong, we have the tools to fix them. We have the language. We have the trust. I am 38 years old now. I have lines around my eyes that weren't there last year. I have gray hairs that I don't dye. I am happier than I have ever been. Not because I am rich, but because I am known. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from hiding your struggles. I lived with that for years. I lived with the fear that if people knew how hard I was working to keep my head above water, they would judge me. They would pity me. They would treat me differently. Julian taught me that the right people won't do that. The right people will hand you a life jacket and swim alongside you. They won't pull you into their boat and tell you to sit down. They will stay in the water with you. That is what love is. It is not rescue. It is companionship in the storm. And the storm will come. It always comes. The economy will shift, health will fail, plans will change. But if you have the trust, if you have the communication, you can weather it. I look back at the beginning of this story, at the woman standing in the rain outside the Sterling room. She was anxious. She was hopeful but guarded. She was protecting herself from a world that had often disappointed her. I want to tell her that it's okay to be guarded. I want to tell her that her caution is a strength, not a weakness. It kept her safe until the right person came along. It kept her from settling for less than she deserved. I want to tell her that the wrong date was actually the right one. That the mistake was the mechanism that brought them together. Sometimes the universe works in strange ways. Sometimes you have to get lost to find where you are going. We are still learning. We are still growing. There are days when the difference in our backgrounds creates friction. There are days when I feel inadequate, and there are days when he feels misunderstood. But we talk. We always talk. We don't let the sun go down on our anger. We don't let the silence stretch too long. We prioritize the relationship over the ego. That is the secret. That is the thing that no one tells you. Wealth doesn't matter. Status doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the willingness to be vulnerable, to say I was wrong, to say I am hurt, to say I need you. The city lights blur through the rain on the car window as we drive home. I rest my head on his shoulder. He puts his arm around me. It is a simple gesture. It is enough. I think about the script of my life. For a long time, I thought I was writing a tragedy. I thought the ending was predetermined by my circumstances. I thought I was destined to struggle, to scrape by, to never quite catch a break. But the story changed. The genre shifted. It became a drama of resolution. It became a story about two people who chose each other, not despite their differences, but because of the way they navigated them. I want to leave this here as a record. Not for fame, not for attention, but for anyone who is sitting in a restaurant feeling out of place. For anyone who is hiding their debt. For anyone who is afraid to love because they are afraid of being hurt. I want you to know that you are worthy. You are worthy of the love that asks nothing of you but your truth. You are worthy of the partner who respects your boundaries. You are worthy of the happy ending. It doesn't come from luck. It comes from work. It comes from the decision to choose clarity over anger. It comes from the courage to stay when you want to run and to speak when you want to hide. Julian turns the car onto my street. He doesn't assume I want to go to his place. He asks, "Do you want to come up or do you want to go home?" I smile. I say, "Let's go home, our home." The word still feels new in my mouth. Our home. It is a place we built together. Not just the physical space, but the emotional space. It is a place where I can be poor or rich or tired or strong, and I will be loved. That is the only wealth that matters. That is the only security that lasts. As we walk up the stairs to the apartment, I think about the file in the drawer. It is still there. We didn't throw it away. We kept it as a reminder. A reminder of where we started. A reminder of the mistake we made and how we fixed it. It is not a secret anymore. It is a testament. It proves that we can survive the truth. It proves that we can survive the breach. It proves that love is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of resolution. I unlock the door. We step inside. The lights are warm. The room is quiet. We take off our coats. We hang them up. We stand in the hallway for a moment, just looking at each other. There is no need for words. We know what we have. We know what we built. And we know that no matter what happens next, we will face it together. I pour 2 glasses of water. We sit on the sofa. We talk about the day. We talk about the small things, the mail, the weather, the news. It is mundane. It is perfect. I realize that the romantic drama was not the meeting. It was the staying. It was the work. It was the choice to build something real in a world that loves the superficial. I am Cadence. I am 38. I am an editor. I am a partner. I am whole. And I am happy. Not because of the billionaire, but because of the man. And because of the woman I became when I decided to stop hiding and start living. The rain stops outside. The city settles into the night. I finish my water. I stand up. I stretch. I look at Julian. He is watching me. He smiles. It is a genuine smile. It reaches his eyes. I smile back. We turn off the lights. We go to bed. Tomorrow is a new day. There will be new challenges. There will be new decisions. But we will face them. We will face them with clarity. We will face them with truth. We will face them together. And that is enough. That is everything. I lie in the dark, listening to his breathing. It is steady. It is calm. I close my eyes. I think about the journey, the wrong date, the file, the lease. The pizza on the floor, the rain, it all fits together now. It makes sense. The pieces of the puzzle are no longer scattered. They form a picture of a life reclaimed, a life restored. I drift off to sleep, not with worry, but with peace. The peace of knowing that I am safe. The peace of knowing that I am loved. The peace of knowing that I chose this. I chose clarity. I chose truth. I chose love. And in choosing, I found everything I was looking for. The morning light comes through the window. It is gray, soft, gentle. I wake up before him, I watch him sleep. He looks younger when he sleeps. The lines of worry are smoothed out. I touch his hand. He stirs but doesn't wake. I get up. I go to the kitchen, I make coffee. The smell fills the apartment. It is a good smell. It smells like home. I bring the coffee to the table. I sit down, I open my laptop. I have work to do, I have a manuscript to edit. I have a life to live. I take a sip of the coffee. It is hot, it is bitter, it is real. I start typing. The words flow. They are clear, they are honest, they are mine. And as I type, I hear him wake up. I hear his footsteps. I hear him coming to join me. I don't stop typing. I don't need to. He knows I am here. I know he is coming. We are in sync. We are in rhythm. We are us. And that is the story. That is the whole story. The rest is just details. The rest is just noise. The signal is clear. The signal is love. The signal is trust. The signal is home. I finish the paragraph. I save the document. I look up. He is standing in the doorway. He is holding his mug. He leans against the frame. He watches me work. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. His presence is enough. I smile. He smiles. We drink our coffee. The sun rises higher. The city wakes up. The world turns, and we are here, together. Ready for whatever comes next. Ready to write the next chapter. Ready to edit the mistakes. Ready to keep the truth. Ready to love. This is the resolution. This is the end. And it is also the beginning. Because love is not a destination. It is a journey, and we are just getting started. The road is long. The road is hard, but we are walking it together. And that makes all the difference. That makes everything worth it. That makes us whole. I put the mug down. I stand up. I walk over to him. I put my arms around him. He puts his arms around me. We hold each other. We breathe. We exist. In this moment, there is no past. There is no future. There is only now, and now is enough. Now is everything. I close my eyes. I feel his heartbeat against mine. It is steady. It is strong. It is real. I open my eyes. I look at him. I see the man I love. I see the partner I chose. I see the future I built. And I know. I know that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I am home. I am loved. I am free. And I am happy. This is the truth. This is the story. This is the life. And it is beautiful. It is beautiful because we made it so. We made it with our hands. We made it with our hearts. We made it with our words. And we will keep making it. Every day, every choice, every breath, until the end. And even then, the love will remain. The trust will remain. The truth will remain. That is the legacy. That is the gift. That is the life we chose. And I would choose it again, every time. I would choose the wrong date. I would choose the rain. I would choose the file. I would choose the hard conversation. I would choose him. Because in choosing him, I chose myself. And that is the greatest resolution of all. To find yourself in the love of another. To find your worth in the eyes of someone who sees you clearly. To find your home in the heart of someone who keeps you safe. That is the story. That is my story. And I am telling it so you know it is possible. It is possible to heal. It is possible to trust. It is possible to love. You just have to be brave enough to begin. You just have to be brave enough to stay. You just have to be brave enough to choose clarity over anger. And when you do, you will find that the world opens up. You will find that the rain stops. You will find that the sun shines. And you will find that you are not alone. You are never alone. Not when you have the truth. Not when you have the trust. Not when you have the love. This is the promise. This is the proof. This is the life. And it is waiting for you. It is waiting for us. And we are ready. We are ready to live. We are ready to love. We are ready to be. This is the end of the story and the beginning of the life. And it is good. It is very good.